I'm going to read from Swami Kriyanandaji's book, Affirmations for Self-Healing, as this reading is relevant to the topic tonight, and some readings from the Gita also. And this topic is alertness. And Swamiji writes, there are two currents in life. One takes us downward toward unconsciousness, the other upward toward cosmic consciousness. The first is an impulse born of the sense of past familiarity. Life, like a lotus, evolves out of the mud of lower consciousness toward the light of divine awareness. Subconsciously, we imagine ourselves comfortable with the stages we've traversed so far, but we are not always so ready for the adventure of further growth. The second current in life is the soul's impulse. We cannot find happiness in turning back toward the mud. Fulfillment lies only in reaching up toward perfect divine awareness. To achieve it, we must be alert in everything we do, for in the flow of increasing wakefulness lies the joy we are all seeking. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Well, this topic this evening, making spiritual progress, it's obviously something that we're all interested in doing, and yet we all bog down at times and we just look at ourselves and wonder, are we progressing? Why am I not progressing? Or we lose the fervor for the spiritual path. This comes from past karmas. You know, we've been around many, many lifetimes. We've given up in the past, and there's that tendency is always there, to discourage us in a way. And it's an old karma, it's an old energy, but it's there, and we just have to be aware of it. And the way to overcome it is that we always have to be moving forward and putting willpower and energy in a forward direction at all times. And it's easy to get complacent and satisfied. You know, we make spiritual progress and we make great gains, and yeah, we spend 5, 10, 15 years doing this or more, and we do start becoming a better person. And then it's easy just to enjoy the fruits for a while. And the problem is that we really can't enjoy the fruits for too long without complacency setting in. And really, we're either really moving forward or back. The energy in the spine is a good example of it. There's a pull downwards to the bottom of the spine, back towards the mud that Swamiji is talking about. And then there's a pull of spirit, of God, here at the point between the eyebrows. And it's sort of a tug of war. And sometimes it feels like a tug of war, like we're being pulled apart inside, where we have worldly impulses or sense attachments or material attachments. And we have these divine attachment and the calling of the divine. And it is a pull. And because of that, we can't just kind of sit and enjoy where we are very easily for very long, because those pulls are there. And if we relax too much or just stop putting out the effort, the pull tends to start pulling us back towards the mud, towards the old familiarity. Oh, I'm comfortable where I am now. And, you know, it's too hard to put out even more energy to go forward. But it just helps very much to have a habit of always thinking of moving forward in some way. And I see this with individually and personally in my own spiritual life, and I'll talk about that. I also see that in a group of people, a group energy, group seva especially, whether it's a center or our monastery here in Chandigarh, Panchkula. And I've seen this with a group of people. We make great progress of just putting out energy and developing these, you know, online work that we're doing and working towards building a physical monastery. But then it's a little too easy to become sort of self-satisfied. Oh, this is going pretty good, and you enjoy it, and it just sort of starts to calm down. And yeah, every once in a while you want to enjoy the view. You've reached the heights and you want to look at the view and look around and just appreciate how far you've come. But then remember where you're going. And that's part of the key, is always remember where we're going, which is the vision of God. And as long as we have that intense yearning for God, awakened, always strong, that desire for moksha, yes, keep that going. And if that is strong throughout life, what happens is that because people get bogged down, they get discouraged. But I can tell you from my experience, I've been following these practices for about 45 years now. I've seen a lot of people come and go. I think more people have left than who have stayed. And I'll read from the Gita in a bit, but they don't get bad karma or anything. They actually get a lot of good karma. Those who have tried and then said, "Oh, it's too hard. I'll go back to plan B," which was, going back to living a worldly life. And I'm not talking about, those who have world dharma in the world, raising family and such. This is the spiritual life that you have been given to do. But I'm talking about people who leave the spiritual practices and the effort that it takes. And this is just, again, it's a thing that's always there that we just have to be aware of, not to be afraid of, but just to be aware of it. And the only way to overcome it is by always trying to move the energy forward. As a group, we're working on, we bought some land up here near Panchkula, and we're working at developing a monastery and building some buildings. And we've just started some of the very initial stages of constructing a caretaker's cottage and such. And with any great work, with any high aspiration, you know this with the schools that you're developing there, with your center and other things, you'll face obstacles and challenges. It's inevitable. And the greater the aspiration and the goal, the greater the speed breakers come up, and they just about trip you over time, because this is the way of delusion in the world, is just trying to stop great things from happening. And I was just the other night, there was an obstacle in the way, and they always seem like really formidable, insurmountable obstacles. They never are if we have God with us and we put out the energy. And it wasn't that I was even thinking of giving up, but I was just losing some of my enthusiasm. And during the night, while I was sleeping, I heard this voice. And I think it was the voice of my good karma. Maybe it was the voice of God. I would like to think that it was, or the guru. But I think it was the voice of my higher conscious and my good karma. And this voice kept saying, "Don't give up, don't give up, don't give up." And it said it with such joy and enthusiasm. It was just purely encouragement. It wasn't grim, like, "Oh, you're about to fail, don't give up." It was just more of an encouragement of it was like a wind behind my back, a divine wind behind my back. And this is something that's really important to understand when we do put out energy towards a great thing to do for God, in line with our own gurus, that when we put out that energy, they put a great wind behind our back when we're doing a work like that. And so as you're doing a work with a group of people, always be thinking this way, of just finding a way of always moving it forward. I have found even that in the last several years, that the work that we're doing, when a test or a challenge has come up from within, one way to respond is to react by putting out the fire, okay? And the problem with this is that there's always going to be another fire, and you're always putting out fires, and you just spend your time being a firefighter and you don't make progress. And what I found is that when we face an internal challenge or an external one, rather than only reacting and responding to that exact situation, I've learned to introspect and ask, okay, what is the underlying energy here? And what kind of energy can I put out to not just put the fire out, but to go so far ahead with a certain quality that we leave it in the dust, as they say. We just leave it far behind. And we don't have to actually deal with the thing in the moment. We just have to move forward so far in a particular way. And I've seen that this works many times. And again, forward progress, always moving forward. in sports, there's an analogy of playing offense and playing defense. And if you're always and only playing defense, of trying to stop the other team from scoring goals, let's say in football, and all of your focus is on defense, at the very best, you're going to end up with a 0-0 tie. And at the worst, you're going to let up 1 or 2 goals, which is more likely. So you have to be thinking of playing offense and scoring goals and making progress and moving the ball down the field. And yeah, being protective of your own goal too, but just, again, thinking individually and as a group, whatever way we can. And at different times, that type of forward progress can look differently, but just always be, how do I move this forward in some way right now? Not just how do I respond to the latest problem or the latest fire that's come up. Now, how do we apply this to our own selves and individually? So the way to do this individually is also be always looking spiritually how to move our lives forward, and just work with the practices, the techniques. Sometimes it's just taking one of the techniques, Kriya, the Om technique, and just giving it some extra willpower and energy of moving it forward in some way, rather than just getting complacent and enjoying, even when we do have a good sadhana, but trying to find a way of deepening it. Those who practice Kriya for decades, every single Kriyacharya you talk to who's been doing Kriya for decades, without exception, they say that they're always working on refining and deepening their practice of Kriya and their understanding of Kriya. So always find ways to do this. Now, there are many ways we can do this, but there are some core things that I would really like to always come back to, and you'll hear me come back to this all the time. Some of these things. One of them is attunement to the Guru, of course. And one of the best ways to do this is something that Swami Kriyanandaji really strongly advised. He advised it to me one time personally, but he did to a few others too. And this was to just mentally chant Om Guru, all day long, all night long, as often as you can. And I have found that making this type of practice, you can chant to Babaji, or you can just be calling, oh, Guruji all day long. I have found that it's very important to make this a lifelong practice, that it's not something you do for a while. It's something that you are continually trying to do all day long. It's kind of like every day you're just working at doing that all day long in a joyful way, not in a grim willpower way. But if you do that day by day, month by month, year by year, continually, and I have done this for many, many years, it starts to become a really strong pattern that's just always there, even in the middle of the night. And again, Swami Kriyananda taught many things that we could do. But I always come back to, I look to Swami Kriyananda because I lived and served him on his staff and was around him for 7 years. For me, it was more about not what he said, but what is he doing? What does he do every day in his life? Because I want to be like him. And it's because he's doing something. And what is it he's doing? What is it he's focusing most on? And he didn't talk about this much, this practice of chanting to God, to the Guru all day long. But I know it's something that he did. And I heard a story recently that really confirmed this. A very, very unusual and interesting story from a longtime friend in Gurubai in Ananda, Palo Alto. His name was Nayaswami Bhakta. And he wrote to me about this story. He said that in the very early days of Ananda, it was in the mid-1970s, Swamiji was writing his autobiography, The Path. And he was leaving on a trip to go somewhere, and he was at the airport. And one of the women who was helping him, her name was Shankari, she was helping him with the editing and the writing. And Swamiji was having some last words with her. Ramabhakta could see this at the airport. And he could tell there was something really unusual going on in that discussion. It was more than just an ordinary conveying of instructions. Something very special was happening, he said. So later he grabbed Shankari and said, tell me, what was going on there? I want to know. Something unusual happened there. And she told him something very, very unusual. She said that Swamiji was, he was giving her some gratitude and appreciation for the work she was doing. But then she said that suddenly it's like a light popped in her head, and just all this radiant light filled her being. And she heard Swamiji in her mind chanting Om Guru, Om Guru, Om Guru. And she had never heard Swamiji talk about that, teach it. He had never, because he rarely spoke about that, but she could hear Swamiji chanting it. And she knew at that moment, Swamiji is chanting this right now, and he's always chanting that. He's always chanting Om Guru. And so again, I come back, what did that guy do? Because I want to be like him, and I'm going to do what he did. And the he being Swami Kriyanandaji. And so hone in on what the great ones have done with their lives. He's also, of course, put out constant forward-looking energy to build Ananda, as we are all doing. And it's very interesting because, we face our day-to-day challenges that they are challenging, what we're trying to do. We're trying to do new things and great things. The Education for Life and the center, and everyone there is doing some of these different things. And it seems at times like we don't make a lot of progress. But I can tell you that to make progress, all it takes is this day by day, again, week by week, year after year, putting out energy of just trying to move things forward. And when I moved to Ananda, there was 40 of us or so that were living there at that time, in 1977. We were living in really funky teepees, trailers. I lived in a rotting, rusted wreck of a school bus for a year. I lived in a tree house. I lived in a tiny little shack that I built for $100. And just that was how we lived. And Swamiji had these high aspirations. And now, 45 years later, I look back and I just think, how did we get where we are now? I mean, from there, it's just, I don't understand it. But it wasn't like there was some big leap forward. It was just day by day, day after day, one day after the next, people putting out energy and making progress individually. And this is how it works spiritually for us individually. It doesn't really happen in one big, huge push where we make it over the hurdle with one huge spiritual effort. It's just this always moving it forward in some way, individually, in our personal spiritual life, but also as a group, as we're making progress with moving forward, whatever the Dharma that we have been given to do this. So one more thing that I'll touch on, and then I'll touch on some of the things in the Gita, which is don't compare yourself with others. And always be looking, introspect, but introspect with kindness to your own self, at what you can do to be moving forward, to overcome your limitations and to find strengths out of your limitations. And advise yourself and be kind to yourself as if you were very gently, but very strongly guiding a very dear friend who you are very compassionate towards. Because we tend to judge ourselves. We tend to get hard on ourselves sometimes for our shortcomings, and we look at how great someone else looks and why I'm not like that, and we sort of get down on ourselves. So just be strong with ourselves, but also be kind and compassionate, but encourage. It's just don't give up in a very joyful, enthusiastic cheerleader kind of a thing. I always felt like, some saint up there was acting as a cheerleader and cheering me on. Don't give up, don't give up. And that energy is there. And that also, again, it comes from attunement to the Guru. So I'll read from the Gita. This is from Swamiji introducing these stanzas in the Gita, the beginning of chapter 16. And Swamiji writes, the goal of spiritual progress is, as has been repeatedly emphasized, the transcendence of ego consciousness in the realization that separateness from other selves and from the absolute self is the one great delusion from which all other delusions derive. The sense of individuality is rooted in infinity. There is no other reality but the higher self, God, the self of all. In himself, he is ever conscious, ever existing, ever new bliss. No one created him. He is self-existent. A spiritually ennobling quality, therefore, is one that can lift us toward that awareness. And so these spiritually ennobling qualities, in a way, they're actually signs of spiritual progress. So if you hear some of these and you introspect and realize, oh yeah, I have been making progress with that quality, trust and understand that you're making great spiritual progress. But these are also qualities that if we work on, they are spiritually ennobling and they can lift us towards divine awareness. I'll cut short some of this reading, so I'll just share some of them. And this is chapter 16, stanza 1 from the Gita. The Blessed Lord said, fearlessness, these are the qualities, divine qualities, fearlessness, purity of heart, perseverance, sattvic charity, self-restraint, harmlessness, truthfulness, freedom from anger, renunciation, tranquility, disinclination toward fault-finding, kindness to all, non-covetousness, gentleness, modesty, not calling attention to oneself, steadfastness of purpose, radiance of character, forgiveness, cleanliness, absence of malice, absence of self-conceit. These qualities, O descendant of Bharata, are the endowments of those who are divinely inclined. And so as we work on moving forward, also take one of these qualities. And I would even say, take one that I'm not pointing my finger at you, I'm pointing my finger back at myself just as much as I am guiding my friends here and my Guru Bhais who I see here. But take one that we are not very good at, that we really fail at, and try to make it a strength. And I have found that when I make my weaknesses into strengths, they almost become like a superpower, because somehow the extra willpower and forward-moving energy that it takes to turn a shortcoming into a strength really superpowers that new quality. So take one of these, and whether it's kindness to all, or gentleness, or disinclination toward fault-finding, freedom from anger, purity of heart, which one of these, choose one to really work on for a while, just as a proof of concept of what we're talking about today. And do it with God, do it with the gentle guidance towards yourself as you would towards a dear friend. Do it with alertness, with alert attention. Do it with a sense of, yeah, I'm comfortable with where I am, I'm comfortable with how I am, and maybe I don't need changing that much because it seems okay. I mean, everything, I seem kind of okay. I'm probably better than most of the people on the planet, but that's the kind of complacency that comes. But try to really develop one of these qualities in a really strong way, a divine way. And you'll find that simply by working on a spiritually ennobling quality, it can lift us towards divine awareness. And that is saying a lot. That is really, really saying a lot. And I think this is how even just the mentally chanting of Om Guru works. It's tuning us into the highest spiritually ennobling quality, which is the Satguru, and the Guru himself, but also that attunement to something higher lifts us toward divine awareness, towards union with God. I would even go so far as to say that perfection in any one of these qualities can bring us to extreme divine awareness and divine union. So work with these things, develop them, always think of moving forward in some way. And you will find that if we do this moving forward attitude, day by day, week by week, year by year, I can guarantee you, I really will guarantee you, I promise it. My word is based on my own experience, on watching many, many others. I can say without holding back that if you practice in these ways, after 10, 20, 30, 45 years and counting, you will look back and ask yourself, wow, how did I get so far? Because there wasn't some huge sudden explosion of leap forward. How did I do this? But it came from just always moving it forward, step by step, working towards the divine and not getting complacent. And that's how we achieve moksha in the end. It's very simple. It's that simple. It really is. So may the blessings of our gurus, of God, be with us as we continually make these efforts to move forward spiritually in whatever way we can. So, Om Guru, Om Guru.